actually suffered from a concussion 6 years ago, and I've been using mindfulness to come back from that. I ended up with fibromyalgia, and so having that chronic disease has also given me an interesting perspective as I speak with my patients. So I'm thrilled to see, my book cover here. My friend designed this. That's actually me pushing the fridge over. I don't know if you could tell, but all those little pieces of food had different feelings on them. So that's how frustrated I had been, with food and with myself. And so today we're going to discuss mindful eating and then how that can be applied to the renal diet, and then ways also to live mindfully and what some of the barriers are that people experience. So like I said, 24 years ago, or I was 20 years old, and I was defeated. I had gained and lost hundreds of pounds by that time. I had tried every diet. I had exercised my entire life, and I had beat myself up. In that photo, by the time I was that age, I probably called myself fat, stupid, ugly, and lazy thousands and thousands of times. If I had $1 for every time, I would have been rich. So I thought that it was only me. I thought all these other people had it together. I thought they knew how to lose weight, and I felt very alone in this process. And so I ended up joining a research study as a subject, and it was for polycystic ovarian syndrome, so diet and exercise was part of the treatment. So the person in charge said, you need to eat less. I'm like, yeah, I know I need to eat less, and you need to move more. I'm like, okay, but I know I'm not a dope. I was studying chemistry at the time, so I'm like, but I can't figure out how to get my hand out of the bag of chips. I can't figure out how to stop eating peanut butter cups, and I really don't know what to do. But then I decided I was going to blame polycystic ovarian syndrome for all of this. I started writing about PCOS and how it was ruining my life. It was making me heavy, depressed. I had to deal with all these other symptoms that were not very fun. So I wrote 100 pages. And when I went back and looked at it, it turned out that I didn't write a single thing about PCOS. It was all about food and how much I hated myself. And I really didn't understand how deep that was in me until I looked at it in writing and realized that's what I was doing to myself. So I figured if I was doing that to myself, I could also learn how to undo it. And so mindfulness is how I did that. So I was able to lose the weight and keep it off for over a decade until I suffered that concussion. And gaining weight after learning all this and putting all this effort into it, it was heartbreaking. And here I am 5 years later. I finally got my fibromyalgia symptoms under control. I have the right meds. I've been doing the exercise that my body can tolerate and managing my stress fairly well until I decided to agree to come here today. So hopefully I don't have a flare. I don't think I will. You all look very kind. So mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So that's one sentence that sums it up, but it is really hard in practice. I mean, we're all so distracted these days. We have so many things coming at us, social media, your phone's dinging, you're getting emails, texts, people are calling you and they expect you to be available. And so it's really hard to be present. And so, it's also hard to not be judgmental. We're constantly bombarded with all of these things that people think we should be or should do. And so, today, with all that information, being not judgmental is very difficult. But we also don't take the time to use all of our senses to experience life that often, or at least I know I don't, and I've been trying to do this for years. So I have to purposely, for me, when I'm anxious, I go out into the backyard. Nature is where I find my most peace. And this year I've been using butterflies to focus on. There's so many cool butterflies, and I know like all the big ones that are pretty, the swallowtails and the monarchs, but I just saw this little tiny 1-inch blue fleck flying around my yard. I'm like, wow, what is that? And I got really close. It's really neat. I didn't have time to get a picture of that. It's an eastern-tailed blue, in case you want to look that up in your spare time. But it's beautiful, and we have so many so many beautiful things around us that can help us focus and be grounded. And it's something that we have to do on purpose to take the time to notice them. So there are benefits of mindful practices that have been studied, that it shows that it decreases anxiety and depression. It helps relieve pain, helps cope with chronic illness, and improve emotional regulation. And that last piece has been very crucial to me, to learn how to identify my emotions and then what I can do about them besides eat. So going into mindful eating then, this is as summarized by the Center for Mindful Eating, and that's a great online resource. The first principle of mindful eating is becoming aware of physical hunger and satiety cues to guide your decisions to begin and end eating. So I'm like, wait a minute, I have to know when I'm hungry? I didn't even experience my stomach growling probably until I was in my 20s, even after that picture, because I had just sort of grazed all day. I just sort of ate, throughout the day, and a lot of it was due to emotions or stress. So I had to really learn about what physical hunger is. And I have found now, being a dietitian for almost a decade, most people that I talk to that are overweight or obese actually don't have a good sense of when they're hungry. And then certainly if you don't know when you're hungry, it's really hard to figure out when you're full. So this is one sentence that probably took me a year to figure out. And it all takes practice. So, besides hunger, there's so many different reasons that we eat. It's time to eat, you have a break, other people are eating, you smell food and it smells great, so you want to go get that food. You're lonely, you're bored, and I've asked audiences before, why do you eat? And they come up with all these reasons, and often last had been hunger. I didn't give them the cheat sheet ahead of time. So emotional hunger versus physical hunger is, again, something that I had to really work on. But emotional hunger is that sudden, like, hey, I'm giving this talk, I'm so nervous, I'm going to go get some peanut butter cups. Peanut butter cups were always my thing. So I need it now. No matter how many peanut butter cups I ate, though, that wasn't going to satisfy that emotional need. So now instead of running out and getting peanut butter, do you know where I can get any peanut butter cups in that orange wrapper? I then started to deep breathe. And so if I'm stressed out, I can feel my pulse is quickened, my palms are a little sweaty, and I know I'm breathing shallow. So if I stop and take deep breaths, that extra oxygen really does a lot to help calm you back down, get your blood pressure back to normal, get your heart rate back to normal. So I practice deep breathing often. And that's how I survived a lot of my anxiety over the years, was just to take the time to stop, acknowledge the feeling, and then breathe. But physical hunger is very different. It can come on gradually. Your needs can wait. It can be put off a little bit. I don't have to run out and get that peanut butter cup immediately. I can put it off. And then I often wouldn't choose a peanut butter cup. I would choose a food that I knew would be satisfying to me and would nourish my body instead. And so with physical hunger, you can stop eating when you're full, and then there's not that beating yourself up after. Because after I would binge on the Reese cups, I said a brand name, I would then, go to that broken record in my head, fat, stupid, ugly, lazy. And so if I'm just eating even a treat like that out of physical hunger, there's not that negative tape that plays afterward. That emotional eating played an important role for me, and that was important for me to grasp too, because it's the way that I took care of myself. I had some trauma when I was young, and me and my friend who experienced these difficult things didn't know what to do with them. We were very young, and we were told not to talk about it, and so it was really easy to reach for the donuts. My dad was actually a bakery supply salesman. Ironic. So he would come home a lot of times with baked goods from all these great places throughout Pennsylvania. But we took them up to my room and we would just sit there and eat. But it was an attempt to take care of myself, and I attempted to take care of my friend as well. That's the way that I showed love. But it is something that you can learn to not do, and it just takes time to practice using other coping mechanisms. And Janine Roth is the first author that I started reading on emotional eating. She's been writing about this topic since the early 90s. And she said compulsive eating is a way we leave ourselves when life gets hard. So instead of, dealing with a sick family member that you're really upset for, instead of being upset about that, you get to escape and enjoy that food for a moment, but then you also get to that familiar broken record. And even if that's a negative message that you're sending yourself, that's still easier than feeling that pain of having that sick family member that there's nothing really you can do for. But it's not just emotional, a lot of it is mindless. So here we have Homer and he's eating his distractions. But so often, like I said, we're bombarded with all these things to do. Does anybody here eat and chart at work? Anyone? So while you're doing that, or eat, who eats at work, right? You wait until you're home. But if you're eating and charting, or you're eating and watching TV, reading a book, it's really hard to be mindful and pay attention to the taste and enjoy it, and to pay attention to your hunger and your fullness. A lot of people I know, if they have a commute, eat a lot in their car, and you can get a lot of calories in your system within an hour car ride. So that's really important to pay attention to. So to start, what I did was actually write this form out, and I had a little notebook and I carried it around, and it said, "Am I hungry?" And I'm like, well, no, I'm really not hungry. What am I? I'm frustrated. Okay, so what can I do with that frustration? And in the beginning, the stages of change, in the beginning, the answer was to eat, because I didn't know what else to do yet. So I was like, well, at least I'm identifying it. Well, I probably wasn't that kind at that time. I probably said, oh, you're fat, stupid, ugly, lazy. So that, was a process until I learned how to stop doing that. But eventually, I'm hungry. Am I hungry? No, I'm tired. Okay, well, how about you just take a nap and be okay with the fact that you're tired and you just need a nap, and not beat yourself up about the fact that you're not doing the dishes, or you're not caring for, that family member that you're supposed to be caring for. Care for yourself instead. So the second principle of mindful eating is to use all of your senses and eat the food that's both satisfying to you and nourishes your body. And so using all of our senses, again, is very difficult to do if you're not in the present moment. And so I like the example of a clementine. They're visually appealing to me. I enjoy the color. You look at the little pores that exchange the gases. It's like, wow, this is a really cool piece of fruit. That's beautiful. Crack it open so you hear that noise, little spray. So you get to see the spray of the juices. You start to smell it then. So you smell that orange smell. It's very tasty. And then it's interesting to me because when I tried practicing this, I'm like, oh, the first few bites of that clementine are really delicious. They're juicy and they're really sweet. But then when I keep eating it, it's like, oh man, it's that white stuff that's left. It's like fiber and it's not the good part, but I guess I'll eat it anyway because I know that fiber has some good benefits and the vitamins and minerals. So I'm going to enjoy the clementine, even if I just enjoy the first few bites the best. But if you really pay attention to all your senses and then pay attention to your body afterward, you'll see, what foods are okay for you to eat. And this is very individual. A lot of people have food intolerances, and what's good for me may not be good for you. But if I eat fast food, then I feel sick. I feel nauseous. I feel sick to my stomach. It doesn't feel like it gives me energy. I feel bloated and kind of gross. So I try really hard to not eat foods that I know make me feel gross. And that's a difference between food versus edible. Like something that is nourishing to your body could be very different from something that's edible. So just because we can eat it, like maybe some chips with like the weird yellow powder that really no one's sure of what it is, but we eat them because it's still good. But if you eat a lot of them, if you eat a lot of anything, it could be not good for us. So just pay attention to, how much food am I eating that's really making me feel good, and how much of it am I just eating because it's convenient and it's just there for me to eat. So the third principle of mindful eating is acknowledging response to food without judgment. And that judgment part, again, was really difficult for me. If I tell you that I really want those peanut butter cups, how many people are like, oh man, she still has weight to lose. She probably shouldn't be eating those peanut butter cups. Okay, don't raise your hand, I know. But it's fine. But I wouldn't be judging myself anymore, but before I would have. And, our patients tend to beat themselves up too, even if they don't say it out loud to you. I was told I shouldn't be eating these bananas, but I really love bananas. And they said I can't drink that much milk, but I really enjoy milk. And I like the chocolate, so what do I do? And it's really hard to get people to talk about it. But if I'm in a session with someone and they're on the renal diet, which unfortunately is one of the most difficult diets to stick to, I try to make sure that I'm asking those patients, like, what is it that's really important to you? What is it that you want to include in your diet? Because so often people with chronic illness feel like they don't have choices. They have their time taken away, or even what they're allowed to eat. And so giving them that choice and helping them figure out what's important to them and seeing if it will fit, monitoring labs and seeing how they're doing, you can help them have a little bit more of those foods that they want to eat that may be considered not allowed. And so portion sizes is really important to pay attention to. With something like chili, I really enjoy chili, but that has 935 milligrams of potassium in 1 cup. So that's already half of your day's allotment of potassium, depending on your allowances, and that's just from a cup of food. So if that were me and I really wanted chili, I would prefer to sit quiet, use all of my senses to enjoy it, and maybe even have a third of a cup or a half of a cup, and just really take my time and eat it. So I had this year also where I had quadruple vision. I have an eye disease called keratoconus. Anybody heard of that? Yeah. So I have a cone-shaped cornea and the light doesn't refract correctly. So unless I wear my fancy contact lenses, that unfortunately took a year to find the correct fit. I have quadruple vision, so I would have seen all of you with like 4 heads around you. Really distracting and disturbing. Even if you're nice to look at, having all of those heads around is disturbing. So I would do a lot of things with my eyes closed, and that's how I practice mindfulness during that time. What can I do with my eyes closed? And eating was one of them. And so I actually deepened my relationship with food and with mindful eating in that time, because if I close my eyes, then there's less distractions, there's less to look at, there's less information to take in besides the food. So I've had clients practice eating with their eyes closed and see if they're really getting the full taste of that food. And then, chocolate, if you're having 4 small pieces, that's fine for your potassium, 250. But if you have, say, bowls of chocolate laying everywhere and, you grab 2 here, 2 there, you could grab 12 in a day. And next thing you know, you have 3 times as much potassium. And it's really easy to not pay attention throughout the day and just grab food that might be laying around. That was a really nice coincidence. So, mindful living to me is trying to be mindful and not just your eating, your hydration, but in every aspect of your life. And so, like I said, I've been practicing this for years, and it's really difficult. Like, I'm not with it all the time. Like, I was like, I can't do this. I have like pictures of these Zen masters that are mindful and they meditate and they're like in their lotus position and they're beautiful and the setting is in the back with the sunset and they're all at peace. That's not me. But I've done all these things and I've been able to, I think, function much better in this body that happens to have a lot of things wrong with it. So, making sure I have my rest, making sure I have my downtime is really important. Good sleep habits, going to bed at the same time, putting that phone away at least an hour before I go to bed, and then not sacrificing that. It's too easy. Like one night I'll be up with a friend, the next night you're up with family, next night you're watching a TV show. So it's really easy to get distracted from your goals. But if I want my health, I have to keep my habits that I've created for myself and not really waver too much. And so exercising mindfully, making sure, a lot of people get really excited when they first start an exercise program and they overdo it. at is what I used to do, especially after having fibromyalgia, because I was so excited I could do anything at all. If I could walk 2 blocks, then I wanted to walk a mile. And that was too much. And so then I would end up getting way too sore, and I overdid it. So if you're being mindful with, what can your body do, and trying to make sure that you're not overdoing it, that's what I mean by exercise mindfully. Yoga practice is awesome. This woman here is in this lovely pose, which I'm not sure what the name is, but it's sure a pose that I've never tried. What is this, sir? Right. And that is beautiful, and I'm sure there's great benefits in being able to maintain that pose. But for me, yoga is, simply the yoking, the joining of your body and your spirit. And so having, my mind and spirit connected to my body is something that I can do, not having to look like that. So even something like mountain pose. Do people here practice yoga? No? A few, yay. So mountain pose is simply, do you want to, let's stand up, come on. Let's do it. Come on, stand up, mountain pose. So stand with your feet about shoulder width apart. Everybody wants to stand up, right? We've been sitting for a while, kind of shake it out. Feet shoulder width apart. I pick my toes up and I spread them out and I put them down. So my feet are planted. So now I'm picturing rooting down into the ground, and I am strong in my feet. I have a soft bend in my knees, and then I go up my body until I get to my head. A soft bend. The pelvis, instead of being tipped forward or back, is neutral. And so when you do that, your stomach's engaged, your core is engaged. Our shoulders all day are like this, right? We're on our phones and stuff. So roll them back, pull your shoulder blades together, and feel how tall and strong you feel. And then reach up through the top of your head, and sort of like there's a string pulling you up as tall as you can go. Take a deep breath. Maybe your hands face forward. Maybe they're in prayer pose if you choose. But just take a few breaths. You are tall, you are strong. And you have just done yoga. Cool, right? And so stuff like that I actually do in the grocery line. Like if I'm in line at Aldi and the line's taking way too long, I'll be in mountain pose, I'll be doing my deep breathing. I don't think people can really tell unless I'm praying, but maybe I need to pray while I'm there. So there are so many things that we could be more mindful of in our lives, and it's up to you to choose, it's up to your patients to choose what it is they want to give more attention to. So there are barriers, and I was thrilled to hear the first speaker that I witnessed talk about mindfulness as part of their, as the possible treatment for anxiety, pain, and depression. But I know that, people, especially with ESRD, do have a lot of anxiety and depression, and it's hard to talk about it. It's hard to admit, I couldn't get out of bed today. And there's patients that we label as non-compliant, and you're like, oh, they don't stick to their diet. They're non-compliant. You're familiar? And it's really easy to say that and to put in, there's like an ICD-10 code for that. You're non-compliant, but why? Why are you non-compliant? I was non-compliant because I didn't have the tools I needed to be okay. And so it took me years to realize that. It took me even longer to realize how to get some tools. And so now, sharing for me is part of how I heal. And so I did a lot of journaling. I do a lot of talking. I'm really thrilled to be here and to be able to do this today. So being able to share my story and share a little bit of, what I did to feel better, that's how I cope with my life. And so, but when I share with my patients, and I know we're not to share with patients, but if I'm like, hey, nothing you can tell me about your relationship with food will shock me. There was a time I downed a whole cake in a day. Maybe not one sitting, but like I'd slice off a piece all day. So once I tell somebody that, they're like, okay, all right, I ate blah, blah, blah. That's not on my diet. So, just giving them a safe space to talk and helping them deal with the shame associated with having chronic disease and the depression and anxiety that people feel that they have to hide. And so, that broken record is definitely something that people need to work on, because if you have anxiety and depression, you probably have this neurotic voice in the background that's doing all this talking. I know mine is still in there, and I talk to it now, and I just tell it to be quiet. Like I acknowledge it as my anxiety, and I take my breaths. But I had to purposely put in better thoughts. And so I am beautiful, I am strong, I am intelligent. I had to tell myself that over and over. And it sounds cocky if I say that to some people, but it's okay if I said I was fat, stupid, ugly, lazy. So, it's okay to feel good about yourself. It's okay to know that you're strong, and it's okay to tell yourself good things. And so music is definitely something that helped me. I have playlists for everything. So I'd highly recommend, if people can't get out of bed, get that happy music playing, whatever it is you choose to look at. So spoon theory is the last thing I wanted to talk about today. Spoon theory, did people know about spoon theory? It's in support groups for chronic illnesses. It was developed about 20 years ago by a woman who had lupus, and she was trying to explain what it was like to live with lupus and live with the amount of energy she had. She happened to be sitting at a table, so she grabbed the spoons and said, okay, I needed 1 spoon for the shower that I had to take to come meet you. I needed 2 spoons to drive here. I need 2 spoons to drive back, but I only had 5 spoons today. So now when I go home, I won't have energy to make dinner for my family. I won't have energy to stop at the store. I just need to go, and then I'm pretty much done. So, it's being more mindful of how much energy you have, what are the things you want to do to prioritize, and, what is it that you want to spend your spoons on. And so again, if you have those non-compliant patients that I know it's easy to label and move on, just realize that they probably don't have a spoon. So, thank you, everyone.